All right, welcome back, guys, to another in my series of dialing in videos for our Line 6 Helix. I've had a bunch of requests over the last little while, actually number of months, to work on dialing in an Eric Johnson style tone. Especially, I did a guitar solo cover video a bunch of months ago, I think, where I just did the guitar solo from Cliffs of Dover from the Avaya Musicom album. A little backstory about that, not to bore you guys with this, but I was probably, I think, 11 years old, the May 1986 issue of Guitar Player magazine came out, and I bought it and had this guy, Eric Johnson, on the cover. I think it was a blue cover and had the sound page inside that had Cliffs of Dover on it. And I put that on my turntable, and that was just totally one of the most influential moments in all my guitar playing life. I think I'd been playing for like a year and a half, 2 years at that point. I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. First of all, the playing, but the tone especially, it was just so different than anything else I'd listened to, you know. It wasn't Van Halen, it wasn't Yngwie Malmsteen, it wasn't anything like that. It was just so different, so dark, and, well, like they call it the violin type tone, you know. So I thought that would be interesting to maybe try and dial something like that in on the Helix. I know it's quite the challenge to even come close to that tone, so I thought, well, let's see what we can do. The interesting thing about that is with the Avaya Musicom album, Cliffs of Dover, the whole intro is done, just guitars, so it is kind of easier to hear what's going on versus like something that's in the full mix, you know. So I was able to kind of pull that up. I don't know if you guys remember my Alex Lifeson video, the dialing the Limelight tone. I kind of analyzed the frequency spectrum of the guitar with curve EQ, Vox Angle curve EQ in Cubase, just to get an idea. So I did the same thing here, just to get an idea of where I should be kind of really fine-tuning the frequencies for this. So I did that, and I kind of started dialing it in based off of just what I was hearing and a little bit off of that graph. And I think we got something kind of usable here. It's kind of cool. So I hope you guys enjoy this. So let's take a look over to HX Edit. This is a little different. I started off with my normal template with the split crossover idea here, but I actually, I think this might be the first time I've done this, is used two of these split crossovers. Obviously, we have to use both paths for this, as we can only use one per path, but I'll explain why I did that. For now, everything's off except the compressor at the end, the cab, and the amp. So let's take through a step at a time how I got here, okay, to this tone. If you notice too, I have two snapshots, Strat and 335. I'm going to use this in a mix later. I have a really cool backing track for Cliffs of Dover that is from Bobby's Backing Tracks. I think it's just bobbysbackingtracks.com. They do some really, really cool backing tracks, really high quality stuff. So the trick about this one, though, was getting the intro in time so it comes in with the band with that whole sort of freeform intro. So I did my best to do that. You'll see that later. I had to play it with a click, which was a bit of a nightmare. It took a few takes to just kind of get it so that I was actually coming in with the band, especially since it's such a freeform thing. But anyways, that's neither here nor there right now. You'll have to excuse my subpar playing on that. I didn't have a lot of time to practice it, and it was a bit tricky to get it with the click. But anyways, I dialed in one snapshot for Strat. So because from what I understand, obviously I wasn't at the recording session when they were doing this, but Eric apparently from all the knowledge that's out there, or maybe he said it, used a Strat on the intro of that song, but then for most of the rest of the song he used a Gibson 335. So I did tweak the patch a little bit. And something you got to remember, in the studio at Mixdown, right, if he did do that, maybe they took the 335 tone, if it was recorded through all Eric's same rig, and EQ'd it, maybe cut some lows out or whatever, So we don't really know whatever happens at the mixing and mastering stage. So it's something to keep in mind, that you just think, well, I plug the 335 in and all of a sudden it sounds too boomy and muddy. Well, yeah, it may very well do that versus like a single coil bridge pickup, right? So a lot of times the mixing engineer and whatnot could. Who knows, right? I wasn't there when they did that, but it is a common occurrence. So just a side point on that. So I did too, and I'll explain to you what I changed between the snapshots between the Strat and the 335. So I went with the Brit Plexi Norm. I didn't want to go with the bright version of that amp, obviously. It's not a super bright tone. It's more on the dark side, although there is some upper mids and highs in there, suspiciously enough. But so what I did is I just noodled with that, and I pulled the bass back to 1, mid back to 1, treble on 10, believe it or not, presence on 2.8, channel volume on 6, and master on 10. That channel volume may have to come up, actually. depending on where we are. Well, I guess the meters are reading okay on. Anyways, if you have to change the channel volume for your system to get your levels where you are, that's fine. A master on 10. So drive on 7.7. So the way that sounded right off the bat. Oh, sorry. And also the cab I used was the 412 greenback 25 with a 121 ribbon. Nothing changed in that, just that 1 inch. So that sounded like this. That's about as far from Eric Johnson's tone as you're going to get, isn't it? I mean, that's really nothing like it. There's not enough gain. There's not enough of that searing, lead tone. But little dark sounding, right? Which is really kind of funny because I have the treble and the presence way up, but the ribbon mic has a lot to do with that. Okay, so first thing I said is, well, you know what? I want to add some overdrive to this. And what I decided to do is go in with the valve driver. And I added that in with the bass on 9. So what I kind of took out on the bass on the amp, I really added back in on the valve driver. I found the valve driver with the treble too high and the bass too low gets very thin and not a pleasant sound. And I have the treble on 5. So that added this to the sound. Now, obviously, delay and reverb are a big part of Eric's tone. So right away, I went in and I put a pretty lush reverb on. I was using the 63 Spring, decay at 4.7, pre-delay at 5, the mix at 42%. You'll notice that's set up as a snapshot because that's one of the changes I made. In that intro, I wanted a lot more lush sound because we weren't trying to cut through a mix. That's just all by itself, right? When I went to the 335 snapshot, which is going to be the one that's going to be used in the mix, now I lowered that to 26% just so it didn't get lost in the mix. It kind of cut through a little bit better. So by adding that reverb in, it sounded like this. Okay, so not exceptionally spring-like, actually. It kind of, it works. So again, without that, and without the tube driver, we add those two things in. I'm sorry, I put the delay on. I meant the reverb. And I wish it would listen to me and go on. There we go. Nice. So I like the amount of drive I had. I also added a delay in. I decided to go with the transistor tape set to a quarter note at a tempo of 192, which I believe is a tempo of my backing track. That's why I did that. That can be changed to whatever you need. Feedback of 11% and a mix of 35%. Now, I don't know if that's what Eric used on it. It worked for me in the mix and as I was playing. You might want to play more with that. Again, this is all my personal preference. And again, keep in mind my standard disclaimer. I'm not saying that I dialed in Eric's tone here. I'm trying to come to something in that vibe, in that vein, right? To mimic it that would be a usable tone for my monitoring system, my pickups, and so on and so forth. But okay, so it was starting to come around, but I still didn't really like the overall EQ contour. And that's why I started bringing in these crossovers, right? So the first crossover I had was set at 320 hertz to sort of get down into the low mids and the bottom and see if we could contour that a bit. And what I did there is I pulled out, I did nothing on the frequencies above that, but I did pull out 7.8 dB underneath. So now we're starting to get that violin type tone. Again, let me turn that off. You can hear it without it. Okay. The second crossover I used, though, was set at 5 kilohertz. And now this is the one I was going to use to deal with the higher frequencies, right? So again, the lower one didn't do anything to it. The higher one, I boosted that up 10.4 dB to get that crackly sound he almost has. I don't know how else to put it, but... Okay, still wasn't there, but it was coming together now. So some pretty dramatic moves, right? So finally I said, okay, I got to put a couple EQs in here. So the first EQ I brought in, I did a couple interesting things. I went to 100 hertz at a Q of 1.8 and pulled out 2.5 dB. I went to 1.4 kilohertz at a Q of 0.9 and I pulled out 7.8 dB. Seems crazy, right? But I just wanted to contour that and concentrate more on the higher end, right? The mids in this are quite scooped out, which is kind of funny. And then at 6 kilohertz, at quite a narrow Q of 3.9, I took out 3.9 dB. My low cut was at 50, and my high cut, I didn't go very low on it. It's 15.8 kilohertz. So without that EQ, sounds like this. With it, sounds like this. All right, further EQ needed though. I pulled up a 10-band graphic, and I just used the graphic as it was a particular frequency that was still bugging me a little bit. 2 kilohertz and 4 kilohertz. I pulled it another further 1.3 dB at 4 kilohertz and minus 0.2 dB at 2 kilohertz. And when I add, so without that, this is going to be more subtle, but without that, and with it, all right, so that's what it sounded like. That's the bridge pickup on my Godin RG3. Let me grab the semi hollow body guitar I have. It's obviously not a 335, it's a Godin Premier. And let me play it with the 335 patch where I brought the reverb back a bit and brought the low cut up a bit. I'll be right back and we'll play a little bit of that. Okay, so I'm back with my semi-hollow body just to kind of mimic the 335, right? So let's go to snapshot 2. Which is, like I said, the verb is just going to come back to 26% on the mix. And I believe I took the low cut and went to 95 hertz instead of 50, just to give it a little more, less of that low end within the mix to not get in the way of the bass guitar. And that's, so now with humbucker pickups, nothing else has changed. This sounds like this. Okay, So that's what it sounds like with the humbucker picker. So it does work for different guitars quite nicely. Now this is not going to be a tone for everybody, right? This is a very specific, very dark, very, like I said, going after that violin type tone that he's known for, especially on that particular song and album. So let me play you what I did in the mix. Again, I apologize for the slightly rough playing on this. I really learned this quickly. I was sight reading a lot of it actually. As you'll notice, I had it up on my screen over here as I was playing it. So I would have preferred to have a little more time to practice all of this, but I didn't, and I wanted to get the video out. It's more just to, I mean, if I had to perform this, I would spend more time learning it. But here I just wanted to get the tone up to you guys and get some opinions on this. So, and hopefully a few people that have been asking for it can get some use out of it. And I hope it translates well. It works with my guitars and on my system here. And again, it's totally open to personal preference here. So you guys feel free to take this and adjust it to what you need to get it to work on your system with your guitars and with your playing style, okay? So here's a bit of, I didn't do the whole song. I didn't have time to even get through and learn everything in the song, but here is a bit of Cliffs of Dover with the backing track from Bobby's Backing Tracks. Check those guys out if you're looking for decent backing tracks, okay? So I'll be back in a couple minutes. All right, so what do you guys think of that? I think it worked. Again, I'm not claiming it's Eric's tone. I think it's pretty close. I think it works well for my situation here anyways. And I'll get that tone up on custom tone for you guys if you're interested. It's kind of an interesting one to play around with, and you can make your own tweaks to it, So thanks so much for tuning in, guys. I really appreciate it. Hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Like the video, share it. I really appreciate all the support and the kind comments. And if you have any questions, leave me your comments below, and I'll always try to get to answer them. And I'll be back again real soon with some more videos. So thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll talk soon. Ciao for now.